Welcome. Sorry for the slight delay there in getting started. My name is Joe Swimmer. I am the Executive Director of the SEEP Network, and we are so pleased to have you with us today, and so pleased to have our panel with us today. This is going to be a great conversation, and we are grateful to Sunil Chandy, the Rector at Christ Church Westerly, for helping to bring this group together. I know that they are going to have a fabulous conversation about connectivity in this time of COVID and throughout COVID tide. So without any further ado, Sunil, I'm going to hand it off to you and wish you all the best. And thank you again for joining us.
Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you, SEEP, for allowing us to have this conversation. Authentic connections, learning in COVID tide. I remember when I first had the conversation about this workshop with Joe, and it was in early July, and Christ Church had just joined SEEP. And we spoke about how Christ Church was connecting with our parishioners through the pandemic and how our efforts have been reaching more people than we had ever imagined. Being a neophyte with technology, I asked Joe if others were finding similar success and finding new ways to connect. And Joe said that we hadn't had a workshop around this topic, so began the birth of this idea, the bringing together people who are on the edge, connecting through the present moment, through COVID, and how this connecting may offer us wisdom as we move into the future. And so today we have a group of extraordinary panelists who will talk to us about what they are doing and how we too might be able to learn from their model of ministry, to engage and connect, and how we might apply their model to our own particular situations in our own places. All of us, I'm sure, have had access to their bios. So I'm going to read a little bit about each one of them. What they're going to do is, well, I'll introduce each one of them, their bios, and then they will each speak for 5 to 8 minutes about their particular ministries. And of course, we'll start with Jerusalem, then Callie, and then Eric. And then we'll circle back for some questions and some questions from you as well. Again, we thank you for being with us today. So our first panelist is Jerusalem Greer, and she is, say hi, Jerusalem. There she is, there. And she is the staff officer for evangelism in the office of the presiding bishop, Michael Curry, for the Episcopal Church, and is a member of the Way of Love creation team. Jerusalem also serves on Episcopal Relief and Development's Council on Advice and has authored 2 books, A Homemade Year, a book about living a liturgical life at home, and At Home in This Life, a Benedictine-inspired memoir, and a host of faith curriculums. Jerusalem lives with her family on a hobby farm in rural Arkansas, where they are attempting to live a slower version of modern life. And she writes, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but all the time I'm sure is joyful. Now, this is a thing that I didn't know, but I think she just celebrated her birthday, so happy birthday, Jerusalem. Moving on, we have the Reverend Callie Swanlund. She is an Episcopal priest. Callie, say hi. There she is. She's an Episcopal priest serving in Philadelphia, helping others find their spark and building a creative ministry. She leads individuals and groups in the work of Dr. Brene Brown as a certified Daring Way facilitator. Callie is a creator and a dreamer who created a virtual and traveling space, the Epiphany space, for others to discover and use their creative gifts and can learn the digital tools to tell their story. I'm looking forward to hearing her story and having her share it with all of you. And then finally, of course, she does have podcasts and she does a whole lot of other things that she'll explain to us as well. And then finally, we have Eric Travis, who recently just made a move. He recently became the Director of Youth Ministries at Christ Episcopal Church in Greenville, South Carolina, after serving 12 years as a missioner for youth and young adults for the Diocese of Michigan. He has worked in the Episcopal Church as a lay youth and young adult minister for the past 31 years, serving in both parish and diocesan positions. As a self-described geek, Eric embraced technology from an early age and was ready to go when the global pandemic forced a shift to online ministry offerings. Eric, again, as I said before, just moved to Greenville, South Carolina, with his wife, Julie, and their 2 cats, Zoe and Max. And this is Eric's first time living in the South. As everyone says, his 4 years in Florida doesn't count. Anyway, these are amazing folks, and they are doing some really cutting edge ministry. And Jerusalem, why don't you start us off?
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here as part of this conversation. Thanks to everyone who is with us today. Father Sunil, you put us up there, cutting edge. I mean, now I feel like I'm sweating, right? Like, but I think like my co-panelist and a lot of people out there, even at the church-wide level, we had to do a lot of, the word of 2020, right? Pivoting and shifting, and especially around areas of evangelism, which is such an in-person rich sort of ministry, really had to start looking at where were the needs of the church. There's always the temptation of what's the fun, cool stuff we want to do. But in addition to the fun, cool stuff that we think is fun and cool, where were the actual needs? What was actually needed by congregations and lay people and clergy on the ground who were really doing the work day to day of how to pastor and lead and care for people during just all of the wildness that 2020 wrought. So there were a few things that we've done. We have done a couple of different things. One of the ones we kind of immediately worked on is how to help people make their online presence as inviting and welcoming and nourishing and communal as possible. It's such a temptation, with online things to just watch church. And so we developed a training called Welcoming and Belonging in the Digital Sphere, which we offered and still offer. I feel like maybe people are beyond that now, but if that's still a question you have, it's just a little training about how to take some of the things that we know to be true about when we're in person and how to do them online well. Things like learning to look at our Facebook chat, if we're on Facebook with our service, to not just abandon the chat, right? To have digital greeters, people in the chat who are welcoming and engaging with people, because it's a different format. We might not talk to each other during church in person. We might not want to be like whispering, this is what's going on, and here's a link to such and such to the person in the pew next to us. But it's a different engagement style when you're online, and it really does help to have those sorts of things in the chat. So we did that. Marcus Haley, who is a minister in Connecticut now, and he's a chaplain at a college now. We started an online talk show, kind of similar. We were really inspired by what you were doing with Food for Thought, Sunil, and called Tell Me Something Good, because we really felt like there were so many things and rightfully so, there were all these hard things that we were all talking about and sharing and commiserating on, but also there were some really beautiful, amazing things being birthed. And so there's 2 seasons of that show where we just invite people from all over the church doing all sorts of unique ministries to come on and tell us what's good, right? Like, what is blossoming? Where is the good news? And as an evangelist, that's very important. So where's the good news happening in their ministry context, and what advice would they give to other people who were looking at that? And then we started the evangelism huddle, which is once a month on Wednesdays, the 3rd Wednesday of every month at noon. And we just, we come together and we have a mentor, so around a different topic each month. We don't call them experts because we're all learners, and so we call them mentors, and they just come and share. It's kind of like a bring your lunch, it happens at noon, super casual. The participants talk as much as the presenters, and just kind of around those real niche questions around ministry, right? So we've done Latino ministry in a predominantly white space, and had Samuel Bourbon and Anthony Guillen from the church-wide office come in and answer our hard questions. I mean, and I went first. I was like, okay, I'm a white person. and I want to do things really authentically. And so modeling those questions and how, we've done what is music that makes community with evangelism. We've done asset map work with evangelism. We're about to do small group ministry and really our elders, like working with our elders to do evangelism and story sharing. And what do our older generations really need from us, and how can we really engage them and their wealth of wisdom and story in the work of evangelism. So those are just three of the ones that come off the top of my head. So there you go.
Wow. Callie.
Hello, I'm so grateful to be part of this group. I'm grateful for the invitation from Sunil and from Joe, and I'm excited to learn from everyone here today too. I think in some ways, pre-pandemic, I was already comfortable in the digital realm. I had, a few years ago, I had created the How-To-Eucharist, the digital instructed Eucharist, as a digital tool for formation and evangelism, because I knew that while there was a lot of rich work being done in our pews, there were lots of people who maybe weren't even entering the doors of a church. They were trying to figure out what the Episcopal Church was all about or what to expect there. And then there were plenty of people in churches that might not have had the resources or the leadership or the energy to do some in-depth adult formation or confirmation prep. And having resources that we're able to share digitally really can help enrich all of us. And then I'm married to the Episcopal Church's digital evangelist, Jeremy Tackett. So he literally has digital in his title, Jerusalem's co-worker, Jeremy. And so we have a room in our house that has all sorts of equipment, cameras and microphones and, podcasting gear and all of these things. And so in some ways, we were really well prepared for this time. In other ways, a large part of my ministry is about gathering people. I do a lot of leading retreats. Prior to the pandemic, I was working on building a physical brick and mortar space here in Philadelphia called the Epiphany Space, where people's dreams come to life from start to finish. And so it was going to be space where people could come and work with me in the work I lead in what I call finding your spark, vocational discernment. So figuring out what your dream is, and then having access to the video and audio recording equipment so that you could build and tell parts of your dream, and coming back to share the completed product. And it became very clear once March 2020 hit that that maybe a brick and mortar, not having a brick and mortar place was really a blessing. I was really grateful to not have had to shut something down. And instead, I've been seeking the ways that I can provide that work of vocational discernment to people, online, virtually, but also as I move around the country, taking the Epiphany Space as a traveling space, taking with me the workshops and the ways to help people be more comfortable with audio and video equipment, being able to tell their story in ways that that surpass just what you can do just in the room. But I think my biggest challenge was that in leading retreats, there's a big component of trust and vulnerability that happens through being able to be together in the flesh. And I didn't know what would look what retreats might look like during this time. And I had certainly seen in early pandemic, people jumping on things like webinars and whatnot. But it was actually Jerusalem who I sat down with, and I said, I want to figure out an embodied way of coming together and having retreats together. And she's always one of my favorite people to brainstorm with. Soon we were going back and forth with ideas, and she said, what if you're in a beautiful place or out in the woods, you know, and you've got this beautiful backdrop, and that helps people enter in, even if they're at their home. And I said, oh, how about we take it one step further? And this is how the BYO cabin retreat was born. Bring your own cabin. And so my first COVID retreat last fall was with several individuals who had found a spare room in their house, or an Airbnb, or you know, a retreat center that they could be in, and sort of disconnect from the way that we were engaging in business meetings and webinars and other things, and reorient toward retreat, getting away, making space, finding time to connect with yourself, with God, and with one another. And so I've continued to offer retreats during this time, and I've learned something new each time about how to help people set their space. You may see that I have a candle burning in the background. How do we set our spaces to create sacred space where we are, even if we can't join in sacred space together? So it's been an exciting challenge. It's been one that I've loved to learn from what others are doing out there. And I'm really looking forward to, I've had some opportunities to get back on the road, and I'm looking forward to more of that. But I think that there's a lot of connection that can take place in the digital realm. So I'm excited to hear what you all bring today too. Thank you.
Thank you, Callie. And yes, and Jerusalem is great to brainstorm with. I agree with that. Eric.
Well, like my other two panelists, I'm very happy to be here. I feel very honored to be in this amazing group of people. I feel like I'm just, okay, I'll be here, but just really thank for the invitation. So when the pandemic hit, first of all, I work with digital natives. I work with young people who have lived their entire lives in this realm, and they've taught me a lot on what works, what doesn't work, and how it changes every 30 seconds, it seems like, and to keep on your toes. So when the pandemic hit and things were shutting down, I was talking with a fellow youth worker of mine, and we said, we need to offer a space for our young people to connect, because what they're going to be missing and what they're going to be losing is these spaces to connect. And when they go online, it's going to be for school. And what do we offer in addition to that? So we started doing a daily lunch with Chris and Eric. Chris is my friend, the Reverend Chris Teen Fentress Gannon from St. James in Birmingham. And we opened it up, an hour each day. Come as you are, bring your lunch, and we'll share that too. So we established a ritual, a liturgy in people's lives of our young people to be able to come together. Some couldn't come every day, some could. It varied. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if they had pajamas or not, and in times it didn't matter whether they had their camera on or not, which was intentional because we wanted to have them a place that they didn't get that felt like school or felt like other places. Heard a lot of people that were talking about how burned out our kids were from being online. And I would push back and say, I think they're fatigued by the expectations placed upon them by others. But being online is not fatiguing or burning out for our young people, but it does need to be in ways that they are used to engaging. When we force it upon them to do it, well, we've got to do it. We have to have our perfect hair and our perfect backgrounds and all of that. it is fatiguing. It's fatiguing on adults. So we found ways that we could offer a way to connect with each other and continue to connect. And we did silly things. I mean, we played games. You can play games off of the Zoom app itself, but also the Jackpot games and Kahoot, and you can do children's. We even did a virtual escape room together, and just ways of coming together and working together within the parameters of a Zoom environment, which to me is no different than going into a church and finding how its rooms are set up, for doing a diocesan event. You make do and you adapt with the materials you have. And so we can do that with our digital world. We offered, not only during this time of this lunch of games, but we incorporated the physical. So we would play a game on Tuesday, and it would be a competition game, and someone would win. We understood that. But that winner had pizza delivered to them on Friday, right before our lunch. And so they were able to have lunch with us, with their pizza, and really excited. It was given to them. It was physical. It was interesting to find, which pizza places delivered to their houses and all of that. But this hybrid, and it really is hybrid, all of this is hybrid, is not just focusing on one area, but how do we involve the digital and the in real life, IRL, as us oldsters would say. But how do we incorporate that? How do we invite people and listen to them about what their needs are? We had some young people that really had needs to this is really tough and I want to talk about this. So we had a series called Faith in an Anxious World. And how does that play into what we're dealing with? I mean, we saw statistically increases of suicide attempts and cases of abuse because there were people that were at home, stayed at home, they were not going elsewhere. So how do we reach out to them and let them know that even though the world may feel like it's shutting down, their church is not shut. And it really wasn't social distancing, it was physical distancing, but that the social aspect of what church is about, the community aspect, was strong and was there for them. And I gotta say, anything that we did with young people is stuff that you can do with people of any age, my friends. Let's not forget that our adults need to play too.
Well, thank you, Eric. That's great, and I love that. And it is, we do like to play too. I'd like to also share with you my experience in online ministry too. I think and I have to also, I'm grateful for Jerusalem for her mentorship. At the very beginning of all of this, I started to think about what to do, and I always brainstormed with Jerusalem. So I want to thank you ahead of this, Jerusalem. But I remember it was in the middle of March when our bishop, Nick Neisler, recommended that we lock down our churches on Sunday. I mean, you all remember it too, I'm sure. And I remember that first Sunday, March 15, 2020, closing down the church. And we still did Eucharist, but with a skeleton crew with Mass on. And the following Palm and Easter Sundays were done from my living room at home and in the gazebo in the backyard. And so it was a disorienting time for me. And I know it was disorienting for my congregation members and for all of our church members, I think, in the Episcopal Church and outside the Episcopal Church. But that weekend, that's when in that feeling of disorientation, that's when the warden suggested that I go on to Facebook every day and give an encouraging thought to my congregation members. And so I thought, okay, I can't do anything else. I can't go back into the church office. But what we thought was that we could connect with them wherever they were on the internet. This is like the real welcoming aspect of the Episcopal Church. We bring church to you where you are, and I thought that was pretty powerful. And so what did we do? We began our food for thought. a daily half-hour program aired around 12 noon Eastern time that was intended to be just a temporary fix to connect with just Christ Church parishioners. But it evolved from me just talking into my laptop into being more organized and scripted. We even have like a little theme, song, it's just really great. It was scripted with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and with a prayer and a dismissal. The beginning was simply to connect with parishioners. This would be interactive, and boy, it was interactive. I also gave a thought of the day, a food for thought, and then the middle portion was an interview with thought leaders from the community. And I thought just our people just right at Christ Church. But then we started having access to people like Jerusalem and our bishop, and then their bishops, their friends wanted to be on. And so we invited other bishops, and then a former presiding bishop. We had national church leaders, and then state and local government leaders. We've had the governor on, the lieutenant governor on. They all wanted to share their wisdom, which was really pretty powerful. And so we've had, like I said, bishops, lay people, senators, governors, parishioners, staff, priests, and business people, and the list goes on. And these thought leaders just knew that we were all going through this really difficult time, and they were going through a difficult time, right? And they just knew that we needed to share wisdom. And then we also, I think one of the key things about this show was that we started to say, the wisdom that we learn here is not just applicable to COVID. We assume that COVID is going to be finished. One day, it'll be done. But the wisdom that we gain from it can then be applied to the next challenge. And it'll continue to help us grow. So currently, we've had about 350 episodes. 42, it's been shown in 42 cities around the country. We also have, all these shows are also shown in at least 41 countries, translated into 16 different languages. Like, I didn't know how they did that, but Facebook does that. They translate it. And our viewership has grown over 200,000 views. It's definitely increased the reach of our parish. When the reach of my parish was just simply, the doors at the entrance of my church, with maybe 200 people on a Sunday or something. Now, all of a sudden, we've got this reach all over, spreading the good news. And so we're bringing the gospel out into the world. And to tell you the truth, I'm having fun doing it. I never imagined this in seminary. I never imagined this at all, but I'm having fun with this. I think most of all, there is some key insights. I know that we're all created for community, that we need each other and we could help each other. I mean, I thought it was just, I really felt alone at the very beginning, but now I realize that I'm never alone, of course. I mean, I have God, but then God in the midst of a community that's being formed. And then the other thing was that the internal fear that I had to be overcome. I mean, it's just try something. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just step up and try something, and then refine it along the way. Help people to help you refine it. So I've been really enjoying this, and that's when, I'm connecting with all of you folks, and I've had all of you folks as guests too, and they've loved it. The people loved it. And so that's why we're here. And so let's circle back, and let's all go off of the mic a little bit, and just so I have one of the question I have is that I think it's important for people to think about is, when they think about going off of having COVID finished, and then they imagine that people will go back to normal, and normal being church services on Sunday. Do you, all of you, do you think it's that the ministry that we've created in these last 18 months, 19 months, 20 months, is that just the fad of the moment? Or is it a deeper rearranging of how ministry is done in church? And then do you anticipate doing it, continuing doing it?
Want us just to jump in?
Yeah, just jump in.
I think it's here to stay. I think hybrid is here. I think Eric can probably speak to a lot of this just with our younger people. You know, they are digital natives. They're not going to leave it behind. So everyone who's coming up is going to be engaged. And you know, I think one of the most remarkable things that we've seen from the church-wide office is where those points of engagement really are, and where the growth edges are. We've seen a lot of people who previously couldn't attend things like evening Bible studies or go to church in person because of health or transportation issues or other things, finally feel connected. And so to suddenly take that away from them and abandon them, right? I mean, I would think that it feels to me like abandonment. I actually heard from somebody last week who said, we had been attending this church online and they just stopped. And they're like, and now, you know, we have to start over again. And that it hurt. Like I hurt for them. I really hoped it wasn't an Episcopal church that did that, because I just think we have a responsibility to the people who, even if it's just 3 of them, right? We have just as much a responsibility to those people if we're their point of contact for worship and community. So I don't think it's going away. I think how it's going to continue to look is going to morph and change. And, you know, so yeah, I'm going to let my amazing panelists jump in and add their thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we would be folly to view this as a stopgap. I think that it's important. I won't repeat everything Jerusalem just said. I can just say ditto to most of that, but I think it's important. There were, I think there were lots of opportunities for digital ministry prior to the pandemic. And in a lot of churches, there was resistance to that type of ministry. And I think that this just opened up a lot of possibilities and got us over that, got us past that. And I have led dozens of groups through retreats during this time. And I've asked many of them, I've called this the wilderness time. And I've asked many of them what they want to leave in the wilderness. And I half expected people to say, I want to throw that Zoom machine away. Like, I don't want to ever have to do a Zoom meeting again. And people actually put it in the category of the things that they want to continue to carry, that they have picked up during this wilderness time, that they want to continue to carry. A lot of people, and Jerusalem spoke to this, it's not just generational. Yes, we have the digital natives that Eric spoke of, but some of our older parishioners are connecting with college classmates from 40 years ago. How lovely is that? They are finding ways to connect. And since I am a facilitator in Brene Brown's work, I can't ever resist bringing her in. But there are so many ways in which we're isolated from one another. And we were isolated from one another before pandemic. That wasn't just a quarantine thing. And so why not offer up more opportunities to connect and ways to break down that isolation. My last little soapbox with that is that we're all people who are prone to comparison. And the thing that we have to be careful of is that as we move deeper and deeper into the digital realm, comparison is even riskier. We are more likely to compare because we very much curate some of the things that we put out online. And so it's important to check in with people, to check in on stories that we're making up. It seems like all the other churches have it together. It seems like all the other children's ministers are doing all this fancy programming right now, and I'm the only weary one. Those are not likely the truth. And so it's really important to check in and not fall into the trap of comparison.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Callie. Eric?
Ditto, agree. And what I want to say is that this time that we had that started in March of 2020 it is a change in the way the world was reacting and dealing with things. I think back to, it took a while, but the Gutenberg press and how it changed the world that technology, that change affected. It took a little bit longer. Here we had this entire world having to move from one that we were used to one that we were not, and in the parts of our lives that were separated from that. And I think that we have learned, hopefully, ways and ways this has enhanced our ways of connection. I like not having to commute as much. I really hated having to put shoes back on, some of these sort of things. And when I talk about our young people, their lives are already busy as it is. And as sports and things as we get back into it, they're actually missing out on the other connections. And usually what that ends up getting taken off the list are their faith formation opportunities. So being able to offer faith formation in additional ways that they can connect. So why not have in person and via Zoom? And I was actually doing that, and I'm not bragging, I got it from other people, but doing that beforehand because of such busy lives. So why not, Zoom people in so that they can participate and be a part of planning and what's going on. It's just, I'll tell you, it's harder. It is harder on the leaders to figure it out. Yet, aren't we in this job because it's not because it's easy or because we're going to make a lot of money, I don't think, but we're in it to praise God and because we're called to do it. And here are 4 people that are just doing it in their little areas, and we continue to work it, continue partnering with people, learning and teaching, and don't be afraid to look at it or to look at other denominations or other churches, not to compare, but what can we learn from each other? What can we share with each other?
Yeah, I did great insights, all of you, and that's why it's so powerful. We're actually doing this from different parts of the country, right? And that's amazing, isn't it? That we can have these deep, reflective conversations that help us to find meaning and purpose, and that's what I loved about it. And I actually wanted to jump in. This weekend, we had. Jerusalem, there was a conference, an evangelism conference, and it was done at St. Mary's in the Mountain in Vermont. This is a small church. This is amazing. I was just so inspired by this. This church has only 20 people in it. 20 people. It was like in Hurricane Irene. The story is this church floated down the river. It was that church, and then these people came back and started the church again. What I saw this weekend was really powerful. What they did was they offered a national evangelism conference. So they connected people from all over the country, and they put on this thing. And so here's this small church being able to really be part of the larger conversation on evangelism. I think that's powerful. And that's because of this particular moment. Jerusalem, is there anything you'd like to add on that? I mean, I just thought it was great.
It was amazing. And people, you know, Vermont's a very small diocese. Sunil's right. It was a very small congregation of about 20 people, most of whom were retired. And they wrote an evangelism grant. And that was part of how they funded it is they wrote in a grant. They worked with their diocese. They all personally contributed. And then they showed up and did the work. And what I love the most about what they did was they didn't say, well, we don't know how to do X, so we just won't do it at all. Or we can't afford to buy all the equipment it would take, because this was a truly hybrid event. And I got to be there in person. It was amazing. And as I would speak, there was a huge screen behind me where I could see the Zoom participants, and they could see me. But you know what they did? They didn't buy any of that equipment themselves. They hired a local AV or local-ish, right, from probably the next big town over. They hired a local company to come in and provide all of that for them. They were like, we can bake the cookies for the snacks. We can make the coffee. They even billeted some people, stayed in homes. You know, they offered all the things they could. But then the things they didn't know how to do, they went to the experts and they said, can you come do this? What was really neat, I thought about that, is it involved the community. They didn't think they had to know how to do everything themselves, and they ended up building relationships then with this AV company. In fact, there were these younger guys who were running most of the equipment, and even after one of my sessions, one of the guys came up and said, I liked your pie story, right? So here are these guys, they've been hired to run the AV for us. Yet because they're in the room, they're getting something from it as well. It was really lovely. They didn't let things like, we don't know how to do that, stop them. They did the things they knew how to do, and then they invited partnerships from experts and people, small businesses in the community that did know how to do that. And I just thought that was really wise, and that we could all learn a little bit from that, because we always think we have to know how to do it all, right? Like, we don't.
And this exactly, I mean, this exactly points to Callie's point about this comparison thing. We could fall into the trap of comparing our ministry with somebody else's, but what they showed me actually was that collaboration is the key to success. Helping people come together and doing things together is just a wonderful way to get your ministry done and the good news out into the world. And so I really appreciated that their efforts, and also Callie's idea about having the curated space, yet not feeling like you're somehow falling behind because you're not doing what other people are doing. I think it might give us an opportunity. Callie, would you like to speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I mean, I just wrote in the chat too, adding on to what both of you are saying. I mean, it's about being authentic to ourselves. I saw in the chat earlier, someone said, this is nice if we've got the staff or the resources or the equipment or the know-how. And I don't think it would be unwise for us to offer in this panel a how-to guide that says, do X, Y, and Z, and I don't know what promises we would make with that, and you will grow tenfold. That you will find your reward in heaven. That's not authentic to each of our gifts as leaders. It's not authentic to whatever contexts we're serving in to say, here's a one size fits all thing. And I think that goes along with the curation piece as well, is that we fall into the trap of saying, oh, this is how it should be. This is what it looks like for this church down the road. So this is what we should be doing too. That's not going to work for every context, and that's okay. It's okay if you've got 3 cameras installed in your sanctuary, and it's okay if you've got someone's iPhone propped up on something and you're doing Zoom worship. What is right is doing what is authentic to you, and finding ways that it is sustainable as well. I think some people jumped into, I know clergy that were all of a sudden video editors. They learned how to do a great deal of video editing during the pandemic, and they were spending hours a week adding on to their other tasks by doing these other things. And as we emerge from pandemic, I invite people to find things that are not only authentic to your setting and your gifts, but things that are sustainable and don't require you to be dancing and juggling and doing all of these things at once. It's so important. I always like to say, I've got this fancy setup in this space. I've got this fancy camera and this nice space, and I am in a laundry room. I had to use a laundry room and convert a laundry room in my house into this studio space during this past year and a half. And you don't see my piles of laundry, but it's important for you to know that what I have on screen is not necessarily what I have off screen. And it's important to share that once in a while. I love Eric's piece about shoes. Like, oh, we're supposed to wear shoes in professional settings. All of this has shifted as well. So, my advice is to be authentic and find what works for you long term, and some of that will continue to shift. But we don't have a one size fits all, because we're not created by God to be one size fits all people.
Amen. Amen. Well, you bring up a really interesting point. Unless, Eric, would you like to comment on and I think Jerusalem brought it up with the example from St. Mary's. How do we do it? That's I think the block or the obstacle, I think, and the fear. How do we set up the iPhone? I'm a BlackBerry guy. Moving to the iPhone was a big thing for me. And then moving on to this thing is like crazy for me. But for me, what I have is like, I collaborate with people. I bring other people who are knowledgeable and just more smart and with it, to just say, hey, look, help me. And but it might seem daunting, and some people may ask, like, they don't have the skill set to produce a talk show, or to connect on Zoom, or even do a spiritual retreat online. And that, I think, is why I think it's important to collaborate. What do you all think?
I'm going to jump in, because I see this, and also with our young people, this is a form of asset-based community development. Is that we go in and we talk with people. What are the assets that we have among our people? You've got young people who can teach how to use an iPhone. You got and setting up. I helped set up my parents' VCR. We continue to grow with what we know and what we learn. But what are the assets that we have? What are the people out there that's already part of their passion? Finding what's there in the community. And so what if you don't have a 4K video and camera and all of those things? Technology is a whole lot better now than it was when I was a kid. Yeah. I didn't have cell phones when I was a kid. And you have people that are already doing them. Reach out to them, invite them into the conversation. Yeah. Use the assets that you have and do what you can do now.
Yeah. I love that. It's not, Eric, you're saying, let's not wait till we have everything in place. Let's start engaging in something, doing something, because we are doing the something we do connects with people.
And that's what we're trying to do, is that all of this technology and stuff is just a tool to help us connect. And that we're trying to connect. There was someone who wrote in the chat in the very beginning, is anyone else concerned that some of our members will never return to the pews? Yeah, I'm concerned. I'm concerned that we have people that don't feel connected. So what are we doing? And I also look at it, are we producing a TV show that is one way? Or are we breaking that fourth wall and connecting and using it to make us connect?
Yeah. Callie, I think you had said you needed to, you were saying.
Oh, no, I'm inspired by what Eric was saying. And there's, you know, there are some things that I was so worried people would be just stuck in the mindset of, this isn't familiar, this isn't what we did before, that they wouldn't be able to see the value in something new. And last year we did 2 churches in Philadelphia, 1 church in New Jersey, and 1 church in North Carolina came together to do a digital Christmas pageant. And, you know, everyone sent in their home videos, and shout out to Michelle Bullock in North Carolina, who spent countless hours putting it all together and editing it. But I thought, oh gosh, our parishioners are going to be sad that they don't have their beloved Christmas pageant. And it was the most tender and beautiful thing. I got more comments on that Christmas pageant than I've gotten on my preaching in the last 3 years combined. They were so excited by this new thing. And so I think sometimes also we fear that the new thing is going to be resisted before we even put it out there. But that collaboration, Sunil, being able to work to combine 4 churches to do this, it's not something that the little church that I serve part-time could have put together on their own. But that didn't detract from it. That actually made it stronger to be able to combine forces. And I'm still thinking about the pizza, Eric. I think that's a powerful example of how do we get creative? How do we be in one another's homes, even if we're not physically in each other's homes? How do we, church is a highly embodied experience. And so how do we convey that embodiment? And I think that's one of the, I find it exciting challenges of this time.
You know, we're coming up to almost like, it's almost 5 more minutes before we have to end, but I did want to ask you, do you enjoy what you're doing? Where do you find joy in it? I think this might actually help those who might be on the edges, who might think about trying it, maybe to try something. So any one of you, do you enjoy what you're doing?
Yeah, I do enjoy. I mean, I'll tell you the truth. I'm one of the people who I probably enjoy in person more. I'm not going to pretend that that's not true, because I just love to be with people. But it has been really beautiful, and I really enjoy getting to see people be brave and be freed up to try things. And one of the things I have a friend who, she wrote a book, and it called Share Your Stuff, I'll Go First. And her idea was, we can't ask authenticity of other people if we won't do it first. And so I think one of the things as leaders in the church that we can help do in our digital spaces is laugh when we make mistakes. Share about being in the laundry room. Like, I have a dog on my lap right now that I've been trying to keep out of frame because she'll just be like all up in everyone's business. If not, and try things and tell people to be comfortable, right? Encourage people not to sit for worship where they sit for their work, right? Try to move to a different space. And you don't, there's sometimes I'm on something, I'm like, if people need to turn off their cameras, because you don't have to sit like this and stare intently at me the whole time. Like, you know, like sit on the floor and sit crisscross applesauce and go get your noodles and eat your noodles. And how would we actually be in each other's homes? Like if we were having small groups or Bible studies at a coffee shop or in our homes, how would we be sitting? How would we be dressed? What would we be eating or drinking? Then let's do that. And I think that's how, like Eric was saying, we break that fourth wall of it just feeling like one more business thing, or we're so overly conscious about how we look and how we're coming across, and even as far like with services as well. So anyway, that's a long answer, but yes, I do enjoy, and I've loved getting to meet everyone I've gotten to meet because of these things that I might not be able to meet otherwise.
Yeah.
I love what I do. I always have, and I love the various ways that I do it. I actually found that during the pandemic and having to be digital, that I got to know people deeper. Our church, that first Sunday, we also went to viral. I got to be the camera person because I was the geek who had the 2 webcams and could set them up and play my little computer game to get them all working. But we did Zoom breakouts as our coffee hour time. And I got to, because at coffee hour, you only sit with the people you already know. We randomly selected them to go into different groups, into different rooms, and even gave them starter questions. So it wasn't just always the same person. And I got to know people in my community better than I ever did before, and that sharing. And so, and anytime I can hear about someone who is loving life or even struggling with life and reaching out for help, I think that that's what evangelism is about, is to be able to say, I'm there with you. And let me tell you about a friend named Jesus.
Amen. Amen. Eric. Callie, what about you? Just a final word on joy.
Yeah, I'm with Jerusalem. I love a world where a hybrid is an option, where I can gather with people in the flesh, and where this is a part of our fabric as well. I early on started keeping a pro list for digital gatherings, instead of just ruining all of the cons. And I realized, I see it happening here today, I realized that the chat was one of them. People being able to engage with comments and questions of their own, or to drop resources in and say, oh, what was that poem? And someone, drops that in for later. I find that I had a lot more introverts attend my retreats online than attend in person, because they could go and recharge and have their own time. And people who maybe take longer before they speak, they can come back later and add something to the conversation in the chat, and it's not considered out of place or too late. And so it encourages some different styles of being and engaging, and ones that maybe we don't typically value and lift up. And so I am deeply grateful for what digital ministry allows in that way.
Well, thank you. And you know what? I got to tell you, Callie, I am so grateful for all of you, because not only because of who you are, but because you guys are engaging in the chat better than I was. I'm not a native in this thing. And, but we're about time ending in terms of this. There's just so much more we could talk about. There's so many, one of the things that I don't so appreciate is connecting to the wisdom that's here. And whenever we're able to connect that wisdom to people who need it, who hope, who want it, who yearn for it, we're bringing light and hope to the world. And one of the things that that I say at the end of Food for Thought is that, you know, share in the light, pass it on, because the world needs it right now. And I thank you for sharing your light with us at this program, and for you continuing to share all of your light in the world, because that's part of the good news that helps to transform it. So thank you, Jerusalem. Thank you, Callie. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Joe, and the Sweet Network for helping us put this on. And we hope that it's been hopeful and good for everyone. Thank you.